Hi, I'm Amanda Plink, and I'm pleased to lead our discussion here today. Cellular Low Power Wide Area Network, LPWA, or LPWAN technologies are key IoT drivers. Cellular LPWAN enables devices that require long-range communications and low power consumption. The standards for these technologies were introduced in 3GPP's Release 13. Today, we'll discuss some of the things you need to know about cellular LPWAN and its use cases and benefits. So who do I have here with me today? I am joined by Marco Stracuzzi, the head of product marketing, Adam Cousin, our senior technical specialist, and Neil Bosworth, the head of vertical segments. Marco, Adam, Neil, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's start with our first question here. Despite the increase of connected devices and the enormous potential of IoT, adoption has been uneven across businesses and communities. As you look at the market today, what do you see as the main obstacles to adopting IoT?
Okay, well, maybe I'll make a start on that one. And I'm going to start with a quote. And the quote is the definition of IoT. The Internet of Things describes physical objects with sensors, processing ability, software and other technologies that connect and exchange data with other devices and systems over the Internet or other communications networks. So with regards to the obstacles of doing all this, let's think about 3 points: complexity, business case, and risk. And in fact, I think you'll probably find all three of them are interlinked. So when we look at complexity, there's lots of consideration given to the data insights that IoT produces, but the thing needs to communicate, and that normally means via some radio mechanism. And connecting data through a radio device to the internet world has some tricky hurdles, regardless of the type of radio technology. There's more than one way to connect a thing, even by radio technology, but regardless of the architecture, in most cases, cellular communication plays a part in the overall connectivity infrastructure, especially in the bit where you get the connection directly to the cloud, i.e. data turns into internet data. So anyone deploying an IoT system, in most cases, needs to master cellular networks and secure scalable cloud ingestion. Then you need to do something meaningful with the data in the IT world, potentially generating some actions once the analysis is complete. I'd say all this is getting easier though, and there's lots of off-the-shelf solutions to help with this, but then which one to choose? There's a lot of fragmentation.
There's a huge amount of fragmentation, Neil. You're absolutely right. And it's not just fragmentation from a technology perspective. You've got to look at what networks are available to customers out there. So you've got different territories supporting different cellular infrastructure. You've also got LoRaWAN and Sigfox. And of course, these technologies, they don't necessarily intertwine with each other. If a customer architects a solution for LoRa, it won't work over Sigfox. It can't necessarily work device to cloud over cellular, although as you point out, at some point that data does have to go from a LoRaWAN node to a gateway, potentially a cellular gateway, and then up to the cloud. And then fragmentation continues because you've got different cloud vendors, you've got different formats of data, and then you end up in this kind of Tower of Babel situation where you've got silos of data in the cloud. And of course, this is all incredibly tricky, and of course for somebody that specializes in, I don't know, tire pressure monitoring or something, they're not necessarily communications experts. They're not, we can't expect them to understand the minuscule detail of RF and how it behaves and power consumption and all the rest of these things. So of course it can seem quite a daunting task in order to even start undertaking an IoT application. So I think there's a lot that we can do as an organization. There's a lot of knowledge that we can bring the customer base around this. And as you say, things are getting easier, but it's where to turn, really. And I think we can be a vital help in this scenario.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. And then you've got to look at a business case. IoT is a subject that fuels the imagination, but it's an expensive undertaking if the return on investment isn't thoroughly thought through. Something like 75 to 80% of IoT projects fail. perhaps due to the aforementioned complexity and fragmentation. But in the long run, an IoT deployment's a big investment, and the cost of managing an OT or operational technology network needs to be weighed out with the return. And then that comes to risk. And risk is financially, technologically, and security. All can have massive impact to a company's revenue and reputation. Remember, technology is a fast-moving industry, and nobody wants to get caught out with obsolete or unsecure technology. And linked with the business case, nobody wants to be caught out by the problem that they invest in addressing to be solved by an unexpected solution from elsewhere. Or as IoT developments along, it's potentially the chance that an even more pressing problem can appear halfway through a project. We found this with COVID. A lot of IoT projects were repurposed halfway through their development, but that's probably an extreme scenario. And now that's triggered actually a whole load of new business cases in the e-health market.
Yeah, so let's talk about cellular LPWAN and how it fits into the larger IoT ecosystem. So in the context of IoT adoption, does it remove any of the obstacles that you guys identified earlier, or offer a smoother sort of path for businesses ready to dive on in?
Maybe I can kickstart this one. So I think let's start from the definitions. When we talk about cellular LPWAN, we talk about, as the acronym says, low power wide area networks technology. So this is a set of network communication technologies defined by 3GPP, which is the global standardization body for cellular technologies, as part of the release 13 of the standard, which goes back to 2016. Still talking about definition and acronyms, sometimes these technologies are also referred to as MTC, machine type communication. These are, what is special about these technologies, both on the network and on the device side, is that they have low power features, which make them ideal for use in battery operated devices. Extended coverage features as well, which allow for wide area coverage and also deep indoor signal penetration and propagation. Actually, something you do not easily find on the web reading articles about LPWAN technologies is that there is actually a trade-off between the low power operation and the extended coverage. That is, you can either get low power or extended coverage, but unfortunately not both at the same time. And this is due to the intrinsic mechanism used by the cellular LPWAN technologies to reach extended coverage, which is through message repetition, which implies more transmission time on air and thus higher power consumption. So this is just to say, back also to the previous answer, that there is complexity about LPWAN, and so you need to work with somebody which is really expert in it to make sure you properly architect your application to hit really the main requirements, whether it's low power or wide area coverage, for example. Now, another key aspect of LPWAN technologies is low hardware complexity and so low hardware cost, which again goes back to the business case that needs to be profitable at the end of the day. And so we are talking about single-digit price ranges for a cellular LPWAN module, which makes it which allows for massive IoT deployments of millions of simple, cost-efficient devices. And I think this is really unlocking the scale of IoT. Now, little more details on the cellular LPWAN technologies. There are mainly two of them. One is LTE category M1, also known as LTE-M, and the other is LTE category NB1 or NB2, also known as narrowband IoT. There are some differences between the two. LTE-M supports higher data throughput, up to 1 megabit per second, and also connected mode mobility, but it comes with a little price premium compared to narrowband IoT, which is the lowest cost and lowest power cellular technology in the market. I'm not considering any more 2G as a viable solution because we know it's fading away in the networks all over the world. Narrowband IoT data rate is quite limited, a few hundreds of kilobit per second. So narrowband IoT can only work with very lightweight protocols like UDP, and it's good for fixed and maximum nomadic battery operated applications. Examples are gas and water utility meters, connected door locks, and other simple sensors for environmental monitoring, for example. LTE-M is widely used for electricity smart metering, but also can be used for applications in mobility like telematics and tracking applications. The last thing maybe before I pause, I want to mention about LPWAN technology is you can reuse with LPWAN technology the existing cellular infrastructure, and I think that's another point to consider for customers who really wants to have the ability to scale their deployments and expand their deployments to maybe new geographies with their business that is maybe growing during time.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. Thank you, Marco. I think cellular LPWAN, it's not the only LPWAN technology, but it's the one with the widest industry ecosystem backed by hundreds of network operators globally. And so, as you just said, it takes advantage of the existing infrastructure. So compared to the alternatives, there's no need for repeaters or routers or internet access points. And because these things are complex and they're expensive to install and they're expensive to maintain as well. And the good thing is as well, cellular is secure, it's scalable, fairly low latency, unless you're using multiple repetitions, and it offers a direct connection to the user's cloud or back end. And of course, cellular's licensed spectrum, which has got the benefit of responsibility, scrutiny, and control.
Great. So we've looked at LPWAN from the perspective of businesses, right? You know, someone that's thinking about adopting IoT. Let's think about from a mobile network operator perspective for a minute. You know, are there any benefits to LPWAN technology that make offering the service, I guess, more attractive, you know, for them?
Yeah, I think I'll take this one. So clearly, MNOs need to monetize IoT. And I guess the problem with IoT is that it is inherently smaller data payloads. So they're not going to be enjoying the sorts of revenues that you get per unit on a mobile phone, for instance. Coupled with the fact that you've got an infrastructure which is dedicated, which is great for the user, the MNO has to maintain that infrastructure or even decide to deploy that infrastructure. And as we mentioned before, there's still a massive amount of fragmentation. So you've got some MNOs looking at deploying Cat M, other MNOs deploying narrowband IoT, and now we're starting to see networks deploying both infrastructures, which is great news because it services all the use cases that Marco just mentioned a minute ago. So of course, what this allows the MNOs to do is to actively move clients away from the aging and sunsetting 2G and 3G infrastructures, and allows them to sweat their 4G spectrums more efficiently. And of course, these spectrums are costly, and they want to be able to maximize the number of users within that spectrum. So clearly, the return on investment for IoT is going to require enormous uptake. And even tens of thousands or even 1 million devices consuming minimal data is not going to move the needle for MNOs, which is why a lot of them now are looking at other avenues for monetization, things like even solution selling or providing platforms maybe non-IP data delivery platforms and things that MNOs can do. The matter of permanent roaming suddenly becomes a little bit problematic, and of course mobile phones, when you take those abroad, you expect to be able to roam for a finite amount of time. What MNOs are now finding is actually these critical infrastructures, these narrowband and M1 networks that they've spent so much money deploying, in order to really maximize the return on them, allowing people to freely roam between network operators is no longer something that really is quite as free as it used to be. And some are now charging access fees to enable roaming SIMs to be able to use their infrastructure. And we can see the whole dynamic of monetization around this industry changing. And of course, what it means is that you need to partner with someone that's really going to be able to deliver not just a roaming SIM, but a SIM that actually has roaming capability in these regions and is kind of fessing up to the operators and doing the diligence and doing the right thing. What a lot of these operators are doing now is transitioning from basic connectivity to managed connectivity. They're broadening their connectivity offering and offering things like longer term SIM lifecycle management, things like EUICC, for instance, to be able to put potentially new profiles within SIMs, which of course has massive benefit to the user, but also other MNOs around the world to be able to provide localization services for applications. So I think I'll hand over to Neil to handle the next bit of this. Clearly,
I think you've covered it quite well, Adam. I think when LPWA technologies were devised, it was envisaged that everything could be connected to the internet. We still hear about the magic internet-connected fridge that orders your food, but I've never actually seen one, I don't think. And that goes back to business case. And with cellular, the connectivity tends to be applications that need a dedicated, untamperable, permanent connection, like smart meters or security alarm systems, or some mobile applications with LTE-M or Cat M. But with the forecasted proliferation of smart devices, the network capacity issue needs to be addressed. And so the low power, slower data lends itself to squeezing more capacity into the network. It's going to be around 100,000 active devices per cell. Now that would take quite a dense urban environment and maybe a hell of a lot of fridges. Realistically, if you consider a household, you might have two sets of smart meters, say, an EV charger, a boiler, a security panel, a car, perhaps even some healthcare equipment. That's, 6 or 7 connections per household. Then you consider all the other real smart city requirements and it all racks up. So with these small amounts of data per device, the MNO needs this scale in order to make it pay.
Yeah, precisely. And other avenues that they're now taking in order to provide, I guess, an enhanced level of service for clients is now looking at things like private or corporate networks. So, of course, before on 2G, 3G infrastructures, it simply wasn't possible because of the spectrum and the lack of spectrum in those infrastructures. In the 4G and the 5G, especially the 5G world, there's now dedicated spectrum for 5G infrastructure. You've probably seen mention of bands like N77, for instance. And of course, CBRS has been something very, very obvious in the US region, but I guess less so within Europe. But of course, these private networks actually allow operators to deploy dedicated infrastructure for applications like smart cities. So as Neil just mentioned, perhaps the proliferation of IoT through the connected home or the connected street lights or connected dustbins or meters or whatever that might be, in the end may come down to a dedicated spectrum on a private infrastructure which is unencumbered by the traffic of consumer handsets and fixed wireless access devices, thus providing guaranteed quality of service. We can look at things like social care. So we've got public safety, which actually is the main application for 450 megahertz LTE. We've got smart factory in Industry 4.0. And of course, smart factory is an obvious use case where you have hundreds of PLCs and robots all needing to connect back to things like SCADA or twin pair management systems in order to monitor the efficiency of the factory floor and even whatever's going through the factory being 5G connected can follow a path through the factory using technology like ultra wideband for location, and then outside the factory using GNSS and then the public 5G network. So you can see a true sort of cradle to grave scenario here where you've got a hybrid of public and private infrastructure which can provide an enhanced level of service and again additional monetization of the available spectrum and infrastructures.
Sure. So our next question here, how will LPWA support the transition to 5G for future-proof scalable deployments?
This is a very important question, and it's actually a recurring question when talking to device manufacturers that need to decide today how their products will look like, and they must stay in the field for very long time. We are talking about, depending on the application, 10 or even 15, 20 years in the field. So what is really important to clarify is that even though cellular LPWA technologies, so LTE-M and Narrowband IoT we have discussed so far, have been originally defined as 4G LTE technologies, 3GPP made it clear that those are now part of the 5G umbrella, and they are actually going to be the only cellular LPWAN technologies in the future. So someone may have heard about a new 5G standard coming up called 5G reduced capability, RedCap, but that is not intended to be a replacement for LPWA. That is more a mid-tier, mid-speed technology, something more similar to what you have today on Cat 1, Cat 4. So really LTE-M, Narrowband IoT are there to stay, even with the advent of 5G in the networks. And so there are two aspects when we talk about LTE-M, Narrowband IoT coexistence with 5G. On one end, from a standard technology perspective, 3GPP has defined as part of their Release 16 standard the option to connect LTE-M and Narrowband IoT radios devices directly to the 5G core network, making them 100% compatible with 5G standalone networks without any interaction needed with 4G. On the other hand, from a mobile network operator perspective, it looks like most, if not all, operators worldwide will continue supporting a network architecture where they will still have a virtual instance of the 4G core network that will be used to guarantee interoperability of LTE-M Narrowband IoT devices that are already in the field today in the longer term, even beyond LTE sunset. So again, this means for device manufacturers that they can deploy today, they can continue deploying LTE-M Narrowband IoT-based devices without any worries that those will need to be replaced due to upcoming technology upgrades in the network. So these are long-term technology with long lifetime, and I think again, thinking about the business case, the total cost of ownership that we discussed at the beginning, that was brought up by Neil, if I'm not wrong. So it's important to know that one of the key advantages of these technologies is that they will guarantee a long lifetime, and so will really expand the period across you will look at the total cost of ownership of the IoT solution.
And that's a super interesting point, Marco, because whenever a new generation of products arrives, of course, clients are often exposed to new chipsets and a new standards and a new way of having to work. And of course, clearly, clients that are now moving from a 2G, 3G environment into Cat M and narrowband are finding out, in some ways, the hard way, that these technologies aren't necessarily direct replacements for every use case. And this brings us right back to the architecting story and well-architected solutions. But clearly with narrowband and N1 being part of the mass machine type communications element of 5G moving forwards, and the networks planning on supporting the spectrum for 4G through virtual networks, it means that the chipsets available today are going to continue to evolve and be refined and improve support for both existing and future deployments. This is going to bring much needed stability to the offerings, and it means that people don't have to relearn what they think they already know. It also means that antenna design doesn't become more complex, and this is something else that a lot of clients have found between 2G, 3G. I think Neil told me once, the world used to be a much simpler place. There were 5 networks for the whole world. Then LTE came along, and there were 40 frequencies for the whole world coverage, which of course makes antenna design incredibly complex. If we can keep things in the sub-gigahertz range, predominantly for LPWA, and actually we keep it as a 4G solution, then the antenna design doesn't actually need to change from what we've got today and what everybody already knows. Commercially, we can expect LPWA solutions to therefore remain somewhat decoupled from the newness, the newness pricing trends of 5G. When 5G first came around, a lot of customers said, I want a 5G solution. And they thought, that's fine. If you want to pay $200 for what was your, at that time, $10 modem, then absolutely send me a purchase order. Of course, many saw the unfunny side of that, and clearly being able to support this cost-effective technology within the new infrastructures is of massive benefit to clients.
Yeah, I'd say for long life applications such as smart metering, this longevity is essential. In many countries, smart meters are going through their phase 2, which means updating the communications technology, as the initial rollouts began over 10 years ago with 2G and 3G devices. So with the sundown of the networks, there needs to be confidence that whatever's installed today will still be live in 10 to 15 years' time in the metering world. And remember, there's a new G introduced every 10 years or so. It's not that the old ones go away every 10 years, but there is a new G introduced every 10 years or so. But to be fair, 2G and 3G had virtually no consideration for IoT when they were conceived, although somehow the industry made it work, and actually they're still running today. But LTE was the first 3GPP technology to introduce specific standards to address the needs of IoT using the 5G NR. I really don't think we're going to have the same sundown issues as we've had in the past, and this is essential to device manufacturers today, especially the ones that really rely on this long lifetime of their products.
You guys up for one more question?
Sure.
All right. So these days there's a lot of talk about internetworking of LPWAN and complementary technologies such as non-terrestrial satellite networks. So how do you see multiple wireless communication networks, combining together, right, to best support some of the use cases that we've talked about?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start on this one. So I won't talk about 6G today, because it would require a full additional hour. But just to say that 6G, it's precisely going into the direction of putting together different wireless technologies and make the interworking of this wireless technology as smooth and seamless as possible for the end user, the end equipment. So really, this point of interworking of different wireless technologies is something that will be really evolved in the future with the arrival of 6G somewhere in future. But keeping 6G aside for a second, so I think already today there are a lot of talks about non-terrestrial satellite networks, and the main reason it's again coming from the 3GPP standard. So release 17 of 3GPP standard, which is something that was completed in in the mid of last year, has introduced the ability to connect to satellites with the same radios that you use to connect to the cellular network, and be able to exchange a small amount of data, so small data packets, using the same narrowband IoT protocol that you use to talk to the cellular tower. So really the magic here, the magic about this new standard is that this means that with the same hardware that you use to connect to the cellular network, so no custom hardware, no expensive devices, but just reusing the existing narrowband IoT radios, you will be able to get coverage, and the dream is ubiquitous coverage, also in those remote areas where there's no cellular coverage, and it will never be. Think about a vehicle or an asset that is moving around, is being transported through deserts, through forests, or even, why not, through the ocean. Think about a container being shipped from one continent to another. So this is exactly the use case. So having the ability with the same modem, the same device, to connect to cellular network wherever it's available, but then roam into a satellite network to not to lose track of your valuable vehicle or asset when it's out of coverage, out of cellular coverage. So the main satellite technologies that are on the table here are geostationary orbit satellites, and LEO, low Earth orbit satellites. There are pros and cons with the two solutions. For sure, geosatellites are already available today. You have satellite constellation already up in the space, and they can get quite a good wide area coverage because they are far from the heart. LEO satellites requires the launch of new satellites, so new constellations. So it's something that will probably take a few more years before this service is going to be commercially available. So definitely, now that the standard is out there, the industry ecosystem is moving towards this dual mode cellular and satellite interworking, and so the dream of affordable and ubiquitous coverage is something that's actually becoming a reality in the next few years. I don't know if you guys want to add something else. I mean, satellite, it's not the only other wireless technology that can work with cellular, actually.
Yeah, but quite fascinating. But I suppose I'll bring us back down to earth again, because there's a train of thought that also combines cellular LPWAN with mesh technology such as Wi-SUN, but not as a many-to-one relationship with fixed ISM-based nodes and fixed cellular router for backhaul. With both the radio technologies, that's the ISM band and cellular at every node, you get the best of both worlds. You get a low running cost, low power mesh network, but each node can also become a cellular router. So at any time, the network can infinitely evolve in terms of the number of nodes or the bandwidth requirements without the need for additional hardware such as repeaters or internet access points. But this concept can address dense environments, and to make the most of it, cellular should be available at every node, but it could also provide reach to a cellular black spot using the mesh technology. And when you combine this combination with remote SIM provisioning, you get a really, really rugged optimal, and very, very flexible network. So that's another example of cellular being used together with a complementary technology.
And I guess that's quite clever, because you could, in that case, have a solution where you've got a bunch of battery-powered devices, they're cellular connected and Wi-SUN connected. And what you might decide is actually, if the battery is getting a bit low on a particular device, opt to transmit over Wi-SUN to a device that's got more battery, in order to extend the life cycle of all of the deployment.
Yeah.
So there's many ways that it can all be, you can, yeah, it's clever, super clever.
Well, guys, I think that is all the time that we have got for today. But audience, before we go, I am going to drop a poll on your screen here. If you have any additional questions or you'd like someone to reach out to you directly, please just respond here and we'll be sure to follow up with you. Neil, Adam, Marco, thank you so much for your time today. A really great discussion, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.